I'd like to call to order the August 11th meeting of the Shelby Township Planning Commission. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll?
Mr. Dallo.
Here.
Ms. DeSico.
Here.
Ms. Casali.
Here.
Mr. Bernardi.
Here.
Mr. Waxmansky.
Here.
Mr. Rapone.
Here.
Mr. Vire.
Here.
Chairman Moffett, we have a quorum.
Thank you. First item is approval of the agenda. If there are no corrections, I'll entertain a motion.
So move.
Support.
Seco, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Next item is approval of the minutes from the July 28th meeting. If there are no corrections.
So moved.
comments?
Support.
Moved by Dallo, support by DeSico. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. First item we have under site plans is item number 13-17, special land use number 6, Michael Gasser, Fortune Wireless, regarding a cell tower at 2058 25 Mile Road. Purpose this evening is to reconvene a public hearing. There was an item regarding the coverage zone and the appropriateness of this request in addressing that need. And I see the petitioner's representative here, and he brought a few folks, which is good. So,
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Michael Gasser. I'm with Crown Castle, and yeah, we did have I think, favorable look upon the property itself and the design, but there was a few questions that the commission had in regards to the site search and the RF issues that we needed some additional expert opinion on. And so here with us today, let me just introduce Brian Monahan. He's here to speak further, and he's actually brought some additional folks with him. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to turn this over to Brian and have
that's
him.
good. And if I get your name and address for the record.
Brian Monahan, 337 South Rochester Road, Suite 201, Rochester, Michigan. I'm an attorney. I represent AT&T Mobility. I brought with me today John Romsick in the white shirt. He's a radio frequency engineer for AT&T Mobility. Also with us today is Brad Riggs, who's with Fortune Wireless, which I think was the original applicant before Crown got involved. I did take the opportunity to take the maps that you had previously received.
All right, what I'm going to do is ask you to put it on that easel so we can get a shot of it. And
Everybody hear me?
tell you what, come here. I'll give you a microphone here. You can take it with you. And
Never really been accused.
Kinda
never
quiet.
heard. This is a map that I think you've seen before. It was in the original package. It's a radio frequency map. It shows essentially in layman's terms first, and then we'll get John here to explain how the map was put together and what it and all of the details of it. But essentially what it shows are all of our existing surrounding sites. The proposed site is right here. That's DeQuinder and 25 Mile. This was the actual center of the search ring, which was when the folks at AT&T decided to remedy this gap in their coverage. They said, what's the prime spot to do that? And that was really at 26 Mile and DeQuinder. The trick in locating a tower when you're addressing a gap coverage is to work with the local zoning authorities, the local zoning ordinance requirements, and then the local zoning jurisdictions, because obviously in a lot of zoning jurisdictions, you're never going to be able to put up a tower. So what we came up with was as an alternate is the proposed site right now, which, as you know, is in the commercially zoned area right behind the Kroger in the small mall there on the southeast side of the intersection. What is interesting about this site, as basically an introductory comment, is that all of the existing towers in the area that could potentially be a co-locatable opportunity we're already on. This is the tower down here at 24 and DeQuinder. That's the Onyx Ice Arena. We're on that tower. This is a tower over at Rochester and Tinkin. There's a mall right on that corner. There's a tower back to the northwest of that. We're on that tower. This is a tower in the northwest corner of the Stony Creek Metropolitan Park. It's a pretty large monopole tower. We're on that tower. This is a monopole tower at 25 Mile and Mound. We're on that tower. There are no other co-locatable opportunities. So the next thing you do is you look, well, where can we go? There are only two zoning areas, two zoning districts in the entire gap, let alone the search area map, but the entire gap that are zoned non-residential. And that's the parcel we are on, and then the parcel right across the street. There are no non-residential districts to the east or to the west that would satisfy this particular gap area. What I'd like to do now is ask John Romzik to come up. I'm going to hand him over this microphone, but I'm going to, if I can, just ask him first. John, would you explain how it is that this map was created, what kind of data went into it, and what it is we're actually looking at with respect to the different colors?
Sure. Again, my name's John Romzik. I'm the RF frequency engineer for AT&T in southeastern Michigan. He asked me a bunch of questions. First of all, I understand that these maps aren't the most intuitive thing to look at, you know, kind of inkblot type looking things here. So what I'm going to kind of try and do is just kind of give you the scale so you get a sense of what we're trying to do, what our goal is for the site. And basically, the red, here it says neg 75 dBm, but to us, in reality, what it means is good, solid in-building coverage. So that gives us, the red gives us a really high confidence level that we can reach your, you know, little pocket cell phone anywhere you are, whether you're in your house, in your basement, or whatever building it happens to be. Then you move to neg 85, which is 10 dB weaker, but we would typically kind of characterize that as kind of on-road in-car coverage, solid. And then when you get to the green areas, those are very weak, another 10 dB weaker, and those are, you know, what we like to kind of say is outdoor, outside of your car, where you don't have any losses that you're taking between the cell site and your cell phone.
John, how did you actually plot out these? I mean, is there a particular program you utilize when you're drafting this, doing this?
Yeah, we use a program called ATOL. It's ATOLL. It's a standard RF propagation modeling tool. It's used more than likely by most of the cell carriers. And basically what it does is, as inputs, we have a data grid that goes over the whole area. Basically in 90-meter little squares, it gives you the land use. So if we had a picture of it, it would show, you know, a whole bunch of, a grid with a whole bunch of squares on it, basically, that tell you where the housing is, where the dense trees are. If this were an urban area, it would show you industrial and high-rise buildings. And as an input to the plot, that's all taken into consideration when we generate the plot.
Now, when you generate the plot, are you using maximum power that all of these cell locations have?
Yeah, we're using the max, it's showing really the best case scenario for us at 850 megahertz max power, the maximum power that the FCC lets us transmit with.
And from AT&T Mobility's perspective, in terms of meeting their requirements under their FCC license to actually provide consistent and reliable coverage, is this a gap area that is of concern?
Yeah, as I said when I started, the goal is red, especially in any residential area. So really, I guess what I would do is go back to this dot's kind of our bullseye. That's where we first start searching for a place to put a cell site. So when I go back to the office and somebody says, hey, John, you got some money you can spend, which is pretty rare, I'll go in and just kind of agnostic. I don't look at residential, these guys, or I don't look at, you know, how they're zoned or anything. I just look at what's going to work for RF and the best place to put a site. And then they go out and try and get me as close to that as they can.
I'm now going to show you the exact same map with the proposed cell tower turned on, essentially. And again, just from the layman's perspective, and certainly John's available to address any questions you might have, you can see there's a dramatic,
Okay.
you can see there's a dramatic improvement in the coverage in the gap area. It's, in fact, nearly perfect. Obviously, this would be the better location. Let me tell you, and I'd be happy to provide you with a copy of it, the Metropolitan Park Authority was approached early on in this project back in 2010. And we have a letter from them indicating that they can't do it. That it's just a violation of various restrictions on their properties and some of the federal grants that they receive. I don't know how we got that one back in 1999. Maybe that was put in violation of some restrictions. I don't know. But it's there. But I have something in writing and be happy to provide you with a copy of that if you'd like to see it. But again, what John did here was essentially use the same technology in creating this map as this previous one. All he's really done is turn that site on. Particularly good coverage now along 25 and up DeQuinder, whereas before you can see that was primarily yellow. It also pretty much eradicates this green here, still leaving some green in the city of Rochester Hills over here. But, you know, in terms of building out the program and providing consistent and reliable coverage, this location is, in fact, a pretty good result overall. John, was there anything specific or any questions that you might have for Mr. Romzek?
To the board?
Mr. Chair.
Questions? Mr. Wagner, Mr. Wagner, go ahead.
You ready for questions?
Yep.
I believe somewhere in this propaganda you had something about the fall zone.
Yes, sir.
And how do you explain the fall zone not being, it's in the back of the Kroger store?
Yes,
What
it
if
is,
it
sir.
falls on the Kroger store?
Well, that would be a matter of insurance with respect to the lease and the relationship between or actually Crown Castle and the property owner.
Do you recall what you said in here about the fall zone?
I didn't put that together, but I know this. This is a monopole design. It's actually a stealth monopole design where the antenna are designed to be inside the tower, eliminating the platforms that you see on most of the standard monopole towers. You'll see those big wide platforms at the top. This tower won't have that. It'll be a slender, tapered pole. I believe it's approximately 3 feet, maybe a little bit more than 3 feet at the base, and I think about 28 or 30 inches at the top. So it's got a relatively modest taper to it, but there are no platforms. But in direct answer to your question, Mr. Vire, the design of the tower is to literally collapse upon itself in the unlikely event of a collapse. I say unlikely because unlike the other towers that I've just mentioned that have all of these outside attachments, there is no real serious wind loading or ice loading. I mean, I suppose there could be ice loading, but not any real wind loading because there's nothing other than the pole itself. There's nothing to catch the wind.
Okay, moving on to, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Tower setbacks,
Yes, sir.
explain it, please.
Well, I'm actually going to have to turn that over. I'm not sure what the exact setback is. I will tell you that in this area, you would never get a setback equal to the height of the tower, simply because the available districts where you could construct a tower, according to your ordinance, wouldn't provide for that kind of distance. But
Go ahead.
Well, I can actually answer both your questions there. The first being the fall zone, and I believe that we have provided a document, an engineer-stamped document that shows that even if all four of the canisters are.
Tell us who you're talking to.
Yes, I'm talking to the entire board here.
No, I don't think anybody on the board can hear you. We'll wait for you.
You can't hear me?
I can't hear you.
Okay. If you'd like, I can. wait
Why
until
don't
I
you
find the
get your- get
document that,
Get the documents and then come up and address
Yeah.
the board.
okay. In your package, you'll find a document stamped by an engineer from Nello that shows that the tower meets the fall zone requirements of the ordinance, and it includes a full loading for 4 antenna array, so showing that all 4 canisters are filled. And it's stamped by State of Michigan engineer Jason Mark Lambert, I'm sorry. I can provide you another copy of that document if you like.
I have that document.
Sure, okay. If anyone doesn't have that readily available.
Mr. Chairman, I have some more questions.
Okay, let him answer the question on setbacks.
The setback requirement, I believe we've met the setback requirement, which is 50% of the height of the tower.
Setback from what?
From the property line?
Of Kroger's?
The property line, the property there's a requirement in the ordinance that we meet a 50% setback. And if you refer to your,
That's to the property line, not to the building.
right.
Could you explain co-location? Will there be any hang-ons on this tower?
You want to do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We are in fact co-locating. We are AT&T is going to be the first of 4 potential co-locators. All those 4 co-locators will have the capacity to put their antenna on the inside of this tapered monopole tower. As I said earlier, there won't be any outdoor platforms.
Did you try and peddle this in Rochester or Rochester Hills?
Well, as I indicated initially, here's the problem with that. In the entire
No. The question is, did you try to sell it in Rochester or Rochester Hills?
Well, we didn't try to sell it. What we
Did you
tried
try to
to
place the
do.
tower in Rochester or Rochester Hills?
There is a tower in Rochester Hills. There's a tower right at Rochester and Tinkin, and we're on it. The problem is that everything in this gap area is residential except for 2 parcels, both in Shelby Township. One is the parcel we're on. The other one is directly to the north across the street. I can assure you that if those parcels had initially been built on the west side of DeQuinder, I would not be before you tonight. I'd be before the folks in Rochester Hills, or Rochester, whichever the case is. I believe it's Rochester Hills.
Did you go before the people in Rochester or Rochester Hills?
No, because their zoning ordinance doesn't allow for us to put a tower in residential, same as the Shelby Township zoning ordinance.
That-
does not allow us to put a tower in residential.
That must be something we should have looked at, Glenn. Maybe we should read their ordinances. We're trying to put this in a residential area, no? I'm not finished, Mr. Chairman. Could you explain how this relates harmoniously with the physical and economic aspects of adjacent land usage?
Yes. Let me start with the economic. As you may very well be aware, almost all communication these days is done by wireless. I mean, people still do have landline phones. There's still that technology. But the big boom in cellular technology has been data, wireless data, which is a huge part of pretty much every business that's out there these days. And this tower is going to be very, not only harmonious, but certainly advantageous towards meeting that demand for wireless data capability by any business in the area or any business person traveling through. As to being harmonious with the surrounding uses, I think it's also very harmonious. I'm willing to bet that pretty much every single resident in the surrounding area has a cell phone. Without a tower, that cell phone is useless. So it's very harmonious.
Mr. Chairman, we have some communication from some of the people who live in that area, and they say they don't have any problem with their communications. But to go on, if you allow me, Mr. Chairman, the proposed use is so designated, located, planned, and to be operated that the public health, safety, and welfare will be protected. That's been a big item that's been brought up before the Board of Trustees on several occasions in the last maybe 2 years. Are you qualified to make a statement relative to that number 7 in your?
I'm qualified from a legal perspective, although I think your attorney has addressed it fairly straightforwardly at the prior meeting. But with respect to any health aspects of this tower, the federal government has basically said that as long as the tower meets the federal requirements and doesn't exceed those federal requirements, that is not an issue that can be utilized or reviewed by a local zoning authority in determining whether to allow a particular tower. We'd be happy to provide the documentation that all of our facilities are well within the federal guidelines with respect to the emissions of the tower. The only other health aspect that I can see with respect to the tower would be the unlikely event of a collapse. I think we've already addressed that briefly with respect to your question about the fall zone issue. Pretty much the only building that would have any real risk would be Kroger. And I can guarantee you that our lease arrangement with the property owner in that regard will provide for the appropriate indemnification and/or insurance requirements that would be necessary to deal with that possibility.
I believe you stated you live in Lansing?
I live in Rochester, sir.
Oh, Rochester?
Actually, Oakland.
No wonder they didn't get it.
Oakland
No
Town-
wonder you didn't go before their board.
Actually, I live in Oakland Township. Let me correct that.
And you have in number 8, the proposed use shall not cause substantial injury to the value of other property in the neighborhood. The neighborhood says it will. How do you respond to that?
Simply by indicating that there are property owners around, with the possible exception of this tower location here, there are property owners that live and have property around every single one of these zoning towers, every single one of them. There are towers in Rochester Hills that back up to substantial subdivisions. There are towers in Oakland Township and Lake Orion and Troy that do the exact same thing. I'm not aware of one single study that indicates, or even a poll or a survey for that matter, from a real estate company indicating that that has an impact on property values. I will tell you this, there's no doubt that from a layperson's perspective, if you own the home right next door to the tower, your thought is going to be, this is going to decrease the property of the value of my property. But your zoning ordinance requirement is much broader than one property owner or even 2 or 3. It's referring to all of the property in the township. I think it's arguable that having improved wireless communication in your community helps to improve property value overall. That would be my response, sir.
Mr. Chairman, that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nguyen, did you?
Before these gentlemen leave, if you could write your names and your addresses down on
Certainly.
the login sheet for the record, please.
Okay, to the board, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Casali.
My concern, or I hate to overlook the fact that Stony Creek Metro Park is the prime location for the tower. And in 1999, it allowed, the Metro Park allowed for a tower. And in 2010, you requested usage in that location. And now it's 2014. Are we sure that nothing has changed between 2010 and 2014?
I'll be happy to provide a copy of the letter. The letter was very explicit, indicating that their problem wasn't one of management or planning. Their problem was one of actual deed and financial restrictions that they operate under. Be happy to provide a copy of the letter.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Della?
what is the height of the other towers that surrounding what you're proposing?
You know, that's actually a very good question. I will tell you just from living in the area, that I think the one at the Onyx is 120. It could be a little bit, it might even be a little bit taller than that. The one over here in Rochester is a 150-footer. It's a pretty tall tower. The one over here in Stony Creek is also a 150-foot tower. This monopole over here, which is right to the, It's to the east of Mound. I don't think it's more than 100 feet, but I could be wrong. But these are all just estimates from having done this for a while and knowing this area.
In the green and the yellow coverage, is there certain towers that they cover that area in the lower level megahertz or?
It's funny you mention that because Mr. Romzik and I were just discussing that today. This green area here is a 100% solid residential area in both Oakland Township and Rochester Hills. There isn't a place to put a tower without completely, filing an application to rezone, residential property, which is almost an impossibility, as I'm sure the commission is aware. Having no real opportunity for a tower, there are some potential opportunities for literally having dozens and dozens and dozens of smaller towers or smaller I'm trying to think of the actual name of it, but essentially just little microwave whips that would take care of a big area. The problem with that is that it's just too big of an area. Those kinds of technologies work really well in like downtown Chicago and certain very highly urbanized, highly congested areas in terms of wireless traffic where there's a lot of demand. It doesn't really work out in either a rural or a suburban environment.
To the engineer possibly, is there any way that the existing towers that you're surrounding the area you're trying to cover on 25 and Dequindre, is there any way that the megahertz could be increasing to cover that area without a new tower, or?
I'm going to hand it over to John to answer your question, but I will tell you that these maps were actually designed at full capacity. That's the full power design. In actual practice, on any given day, this reach might actually be even less than what you're seeing represented on these maps.
I think he answered it real well. I mean, this is, like I said before, this is the best case that we can get out of these towers. And the power that's coming out of them now is at the FCC limit. So I can't turn it up anymore. If I were to take, say, an antenna, and I don't want to get, too deep into it, but I mean, you can use like a 4-foot antenna, has a certain amount of gain from it, so you get a certain amount of power out of that antenna. I can change it to an 8-foot antenna. It increases loading and sail area and so forth. And that also will allow us to have more power coming out, but I'm still limited. So if I change from, say, a 4-foot antenna to an 8-foot antenna, if I exceed the FCC max, I've got to turn the amplifier down. So it's kind of a long way of saying this is the best we can do with what we've got on the ground right now.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Wexmansky.
Mr. Romzik, could you put the second picture up there? With the installation of the tower, it shows better coverage to the south. Are the towers in any way directional, or why is that not full radius?
Yeah, they're very directional.
Very directional.
And part of that is to be able to. You could do that.
That's fine with that.
They're very directional. I don't know if you've ever looked at a tower that Brian alluded to that has the platform on the top. And typically you've got a triangle up there, and it's the same with all the carriers. Basically configure their sites the same way.
Okay.
And each one of those sides of the triangle is a directional face.
I understand. Another question. In engineering, what's the criteria that you use to determine the height that you want to propose for the tower? What's a maximum height, minimum height, and what's the criteria that lets you decide what that height would be?
And that's, in this particular instance, that the height of this tower wasn't really dictated by what the RF engineers would have liked. They would have, I can guarantee you, wanted a much taller tower. A much taller tower would have reached into these pockets. This height was limited by your zoning ordinance, which has a 100-foot limitation on it.
Okay. Now can I get Mr. Romzik to answer the question?
Yeah, usually what we do, well, not usually, what we do, I alluded to the search ring center, the bullseye here. When I issue, I don't just put out a map and put a circle on it. There's other criteria that I put in there. And typically what we do is I'll take the average height of the towers around, and initially at the search ring, I'll model that at the average height because, as Brian said, I don't know what type of restrictions I'll run into in zoning and so forth. And so, if I'm getting long-winded, just let me know.
You're fine.
When they come back with an actual candidate or an actual location, they'll come back and say, okay, here's your lat and long, but you can't have a tower at 135. You're going to have to stick to 95 feet or something like that. Then I'll go back in, repropagate it. I'll have a meeting with my boss usually, and we'll say, yeah, we can do that, accept it or not.
Okay. The flagpole tower design is excellent, by the way. As you said before, wind resistance is negligible on that. That's your biggest obstacle. As good a looking tower as you're ever going to get, I guess. I don't see them ever getting any better looking than that. Is the tower location, is that in any way dependent upon the strength of the various cell phones themselves? You have two-way transmission there. The tower is transmitting to the cell phone's transmitting to the tower. Is the range more or less limited by the weakness of the cell phone, or is it limited by the power coming out of the tower?
Typically, on a level playing field, it's what we call the uplink, or it's the cell phone is the limiting factor. So what we do, and what has been the trend over the past few years, we actually started putting amplifiers at the top of the tower so that now on the uplink and the receive side up at the tower, it's easier to hear the cell phone, when it's, in a green area in a basement or something like that. It's easier for the site to pick that up because the phones themselves, they're not getting any bigger and they're not getting any more powerful, for sure.
They're pretty weak.
Yes.
All right, that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Chairman,
Mr. Bailey.
I'm sorry, but the area that after you adding your new tower, the areas is a white, yellow areas. Does that mean in the next year or two you're going to need new towers there, or how are you going to cover that? What is the plan to cover that area?
Well, I've never had anybody directly ask me a question like that in a zoning hearing, but I would say, based on the demand for cell phone use, and Brian talked about it earlier, the high demand for data and connected devices, connected cars, home security, all that sort of a need for wireless data traffic. The demand's always going to be there. I would not stand here before you, I don't think Brian would either, and say, I'll never come back and ask you for another site, necessarily.
If I could just add something to that, the smaller that these gap areas become, the broader your alternatives for co-location. For instance, there may very well be a industrial building on Shelby Road that's 3 stories tall. That may be a potential co-location for a rooftop if all you're trying to do is cover this little area here.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
If I may, just one final comment. We think we've met your zoning requirements and your zoning ordinance. I think the site is well justified also under the Federal Telecommunications Act and AT&T Mobility as a user of this tower, not as the applicant, would join with Crown in requesting that you approve it for recommendation to the Township Board. Thank you.
Okay. Let me ask a question.
Sure.
We talked about the fallibility of the pole. What's it tested at? What sort of wind, what sort of elements?
That's actually in the report that we provided you. I don't have my reading glasses, so this isn't going to happen today. I'm going to have to give this back to you.
So the standard that we met, TIA EIA 222G, that's the standard ANSI requirement. It's the most up-to-date ANSI requirements for this region of the country. Oh, okay. And within that standard, there are a little bit more specifics. And I don't know, does anyone not have this? I can
Just answer the question.
Wind standards, first condition, 90 mile per hour, 3-second gust wind speed with no ice. Number 2 is 40 mile per hour, 3-second gust wind speed with 1-inch radial ice. EIA standard specifies 90 mile per hour with the wind speed required for Macomb County, Michigan. The 3-second gust wind speed refers to the wind measurement at 33 feet above the ground. Equations in the EIA standard take into account that the wind speed escalates with the increasing height of the tower.
Any other questions from the board?
Mr. Nguyen, if possible. To Mr. Nguyen, I have a question.
Sure.
I want to see the benefit and the financial benefit to the township for this. How does the tax dollar, I know you build a building, you have millage, you calculate, how does that fall? And
I don't know how they're taxed through assessing. I don't know what that benefit is, Mr. Tella.
can anybody, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Attorney, anybody would know that? No?
What the value is of the tower and what that
Not-
assessment would be. I mean, that's really how you determine
Yeah.
it, you know, so I don't know. You guys want to disclose how much it's going to cost you to put that up? Or what's the value of the tower? See, but, yeah, they wouldn't even know that. I mean, what they're going to assess it at. Yeah, short of the assessor telling us what that amount is.
Appreciate it.
Okay. All right, seeing it's pouring out there, and you folks decided to bundle up and get over here. Anyone have any questions on any of the information that we have today? Come on up, and then just give your name and address and sign in, please.
Van Allman, Briarwood Condominiums. I have a question for AT&T, just an open question. Perhaps you already answered
So
it.
you'll ask the question to the board, and then we're going to get
Yes.
all the questions that
Right.
we'll ask.
Okay, the first question I have is, the map that we were shown with the current coverage of the power, I'm wondering if, I noticed it is done by AT&T, if it were done by another carrier, would it reflect different megahertz or whatever your measurement calculation, would it look different? Secondly, the lightning aspect of the tower that's projected, is there an impact for that? Or something that would make it so that it did not conduct electricity? And as another concern, that this is in a non-residential area, this is a residential area, and if we're concerned about that, there's the flip side of the irony of the oil drilling, which does not do this, but it is yet another encroachment in Shelby Township. Thank you.
Anyone wish to comment or question? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. As a reminder that we are, on this issue, a recommending body. Ultimately, the Township Board will evaluate our process and take into consideration our recommendation. Oh, I'm sorry. The engineer? just go to the microphone. Okay, well, what would another vendor show in terms of coverage? So this is coverage for AT&T?
Right, yeah. I can't tell you exactly what another vendor would show. It would be similar if they're using the similar locations, similar
But you
antenna
don't know what
heights
kind of
and
impact they get from those other towers. But you assume it's about the same if they're all operating at a maximum.
Right,
And
as
they're
long
all
as
on
they're
those
not,
towers.
as long as they don't show something that's way over the FCC limit or something like that.
Okay, so it'd be just about the same.
Be similar as long as their database is good, yeah.
Okay. And then the question about lightning, can you answer that, or do we, come on up. For the good or the bad of it, we televise these things, so.
That's okay. As laid out in the materials that were submitted, it's fully grounded, the tower. I mean, lightning is certainly a foreseeable possibility, so that's something that's 100% accounted for in the design.
Okay. And then there was a question, I think it was probably more of a comment about residential. This property is owned, Mr. Nguyen,
It's zoned commercial, but it is, obviously, there's residential proximate to it.
so I think that's what they were referencing about being non-residential. Okay, so back to the basis for our recommendation must be on the following: compatibility with adjacent land uses, consistent with and promote the intent and purpose of the special land use, compatibility with the natural environment, consistent with the capacities of public service and facilities affected by the proposed use, protect the public health, safety, and welfare, and the adequacy of public access to this site. We may recommend approval of this request, disapprove the request, or table the information to evaluate it further. At this time, if there aren't any other questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Waxmansky.
I move to recommend approval to the Township Board of Special Land Use Application 1317 to permit the development of a cell tower at 2058 25 Mile Road.
Okay. Is there support for that motion? Going once, going twice. Motion fails for lack of support. Is there another motion?
Mr. Chair,
Mrs. Moore.
I'd like to recommend the denial of the special land use application 13-17 SLU-6 to permit the further development of a cell tower at 2058 25 Mile Road.
Support.
Okay, moved by Moore, support by Vire. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Vire?
Yes.
Commissioner Rapone?
Yes.
Commissioner Waxmansky?
No.
Commissioner Bernardi?
Yes.
Commissioner Casale?
Yes.
Commissioner DeSico?
No.
Commissioner Dalu?
Yes.
And the chair votes no. That motion carries. The recommendation will be to deny your request. Okay, next item is site plan number 14-03, special land use number 1, Mitchell Foster Auto Pallets. Madam Secretary, would you read the public notice, please?
Charter Township of Shelby, notice of public hearing. Notice is hereby given that the Planning Commission for the Charter Township of Shelby, Macomb County, Michigan, has received a request for approval of the following special land use. Applicant Auto Pallets Boxes, Inc., 28000 Southfield Road, Lathrop Village, Michigan, 48076. Proposed use, outdoor storage. Location, 3850 Hamlin Road, south side of Hamlin, west of Ryan Road. Site plan number 14-03 SLU-1. Sidwell number 23-07-30-200-026 and 23-07-30-200-027. Legal description is as follows. The Planning Commission will meet on Monday, August 11th, 2014 at 7 p.m. in the Shelby Municipal Building, 52700 Van Dyke, Shelby Township, Michigan, 586-726-7243, for the purpose of holding a public hearing on the special land use application. The application for special land use and the site plan may be examined at the Planning and Zoning Department in the municipal building Monday through Friday from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Written comments may be submitted to the Planning Commission at the above address prior to the hearing Oral comments will be heard during the public hearing. This notice is provided pursuant to the requirements of Michigan Public Act 110 of 2006 as amended. Shelby Township Planning Commission, Jerome Moffett, Chair, Raquel Moore, Secretary. Publication date was on July 23rd, 2014 in the CNG newspaper. There were 18 property owners and 3 applicants were notified on July 25th, 2014.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kirk, did the publication meet all legal requirements?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Could you explain the uses under the present zoning and if the special land use request is appropriate?
The current zoning is light manufacturing, which is a light industrial type of zone. Under that provision, the ordinance, outdoor storage is permitted as a special land use. This is the type of storage which is other than an accessory to a principal use. So under 12, it's 1340, it's a permitted special land use if granted.
Great, thank you. Madam Secretary, did we receive any correspondence
No,
regarding
we
this?
did not, Mr. Chair.
I think we did.
We did?
There's one letter in there from a resident, Mr. Chairman, objecting.
Okay.
It's kind of buried in there.
Oh, it is? Oh, I thought that was an order. Okay, sorry about that. I guess we did. Yeah, it kind of threw me off there.
Not so much a letter, but a fax cover sheet. How's that?
Yeah, we did receive a snapogram from a Raymond Breedalest. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. And basically, he objects to this development and the storage use, what is to be stored, the location, the site. So he thinks it's going to be very dangerous as a fire hazard, basically.
Okay, thank you. The format for the public hearing will be as follows. The petitioner or representative will give a presentation stating the reasons for the request. Commissioners may then ask questions of the petitioner. The floor will be open to the public, and then the petitioner will be allowed to make concluding remarks. At this time is the petitioner's representative here, and you may proceed with stating your reasons for your request. If I can get your name and address, too, for the record.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Phil Ruggieri, 43231 Shaner, Sterling Heights, 48313. I'm here on behalf of the petitioner. The principal is Mitchell Foster. He's been at this site for nearly 20 years, operating an outdoor pallet storage facility. What's taken place is Shelby has taken an initiative to remove any potential blight that may exist in our community. And I've been working closely with Mr. Wynn on removing any potential problems that this site may cause. So I've entertained an expert engineer to submit a site plan to make sure that this site is in compliance. I have the review comments by Mr. Wynn's office and also from the engineer for the township. And my engineer, unfortunately, was not able to come tonight. He's out of town, and he is addressing a lot of the issues, and hopefully we'll have the site plan fine-tuned and then be ready to proceed with the special land use. But essentially, as Mr. Kirk indicated, it's a permitted use under light industrial. It's been going on for 20 years. If there's any problem with fire or hazard, that's probably because of the configuration of the land not allowing for maybe emergency vehicles to get in there quite cleanly, but we've never had an incident. And
Yeah, I may have missed it, but do you want to explain what it is that he's proposed? I mean,
sorry?
What does he store there and what?
He stores wooden pallets that are used in the automobile business for transporting goods and services throughout Tri-County area. And he's got 45-plus acres of land there. He's using just under 5 acres of it for that. His plan is to spin off the remaining acreage for sale to some third party at this time. That's been in negotiations for quite some time. So we're really narrowing it down to less than 5 acres of land. And Mr. Wynn and I have been in contact. We were attempting to remove any of the connotations of what blight may exist on the site. As you know, that area of Shelby Township has a lot of mixed use there. There's a lot of uses that have been in existence for quite some time, not necessarily up to par with our site plan requirements, but they have been existing. They might be non-conforming uses. This is just an attempt from our township to clean up the items along that area to make it look a lot better. And I'm in full spirit and cooperation in that regard. But that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Okay. Now, are we just referencing the parcel to the east? I think that's 027. So where the exposed water, that's.
There was a DEQ permit to do a fill-in, I believe, some years ago, and most of that land is not, no, that's not involved with this process. And I think what has to happen is, there's got to be a proper delineation between the two parcels as to what's going to be involved. That was one of the comments that were made.
Okay, because the application references both of them, and it looked like it was just to the,
I think they wanted to cite everything that's there because he does own all that land, but we need to define.
he's not storing anything on the 026, I think.
No,
it is
that's
the one.
not, that's my understanding, he's not.
Okay. To the board, any questions? Mr. Nguyen, do you want to go now? Why don't we?
Yeah, I'd like to, just to kind of support what Mr. Ruggieri is saying. The site's been used for outdoor storage for many years, but it's been kind of off our radar. It recently became on our radar because Mr. Ruggieri's client has expanded the use of it. It's actually on 2 parcels now, but the site plan only shows 1 parcel. So we need to determine what the scope of this is. So we're trying to use the special land use process as a way of getting our arms around it and getting it into some reasonable compliance. I would fully agree with the notion that this is site's appropriate for outdoor storage. You're not going to probably put an industrial building on there because of the nature of the soil. The concerns we have are really the arrangement of the outdoor storage, and safety. If there was a fire in any place and we had to get fire crews back there, the way it's arranged would make it almost impossible. So we're concerned about access, arrangement, the conditions of the surface to make sure it could support an emergency vehicle, and the visual character from Hamlin Road. When we did this review with the other departments, you'll see there are some concerns raised about the fire code. The arrangement that they're showing is meant to comply with that. But again, there's still some details on here that I think need to be reconciled before we go any further. And I had suggested to Mr. Ruggieri earlier today that I think the best avenue, since there's engineers out here to table this, allow me to meet with these 2 gentlemen, get them resolved, and bring it back to the Planning Commission, hopefully within 35 or 45 days.
Great.
Making progress, Mr. Chairman.
Okay,
Mr.
no.
Ruggieri's been very helpful in getting it to that point.
Appreciate cleaning up an
Being
area.
a
of
Shelby
the
Township resident, I
Yeah.
am concerned.
Can we also get a status of that fill project? Because I know they were putting construction, okay.
Sure.
Okay. There are no other questions from the board. We'll let you know if we got some more questions for you.
Sure.
This is the only public hearing the Planning Commission will hold on this special land use request. All remarks will be entered into the record for Township Board evaluation. We are a recommending body, and the Township Board will evaluate our recommendation, which is a legislative body. The Township Board will make the final decision on this special land use request. This time, anyone from the audience is welcome to come up and offer a question or make a comment on this. Going once, going twice. I see nobody's getting up, so I'll bring it back to the board. If there are no other questions from the board, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Moved and supported. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. The recommendation on this request must be based on the following standards: compatibility with adjacent land uses, consistent with and promote the intent and purpose of the special land use, compatibility with the natural environment, consistent with the capacities of public services and facilities affected by the proposed use, protect the public health, safety, and welfare, and the adequacy of public access to the site. At this point, we may recommend approval, disapprove the request, or table it to evaluate the information further.
Mr. Chair,
Or,
I recommend to postpone further consideration of this application until a revised site plan addressing all department comments is submitted. The revised plan must be submitted to the Planning and Zoning Department by no later than September 11, 2014.
okay, is there support of that motion?
Support.
Support by Bernardi. Any questions on the motion? Hearing none, I'll call the roll. Commissioner Moore?
Yes.
Commissioner Bernardi? Commissioner Dalu?
Yes.
Commissioner DeSico?
Yes.
Commissioner Casale?
Yes.
Commissioner Waxman-Sky?
Yes.
Commissioner Pone?
Yes.
Commissioner Vire?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. We look forward to seeing you again, Mr. Ruggieri. Well, some of us more than others, maybe, Mr. Vire. Mr. Nguyen, do you have a planning director's report?
Yes, I have 2 items, Mr. Chairman. First is just the review of our administrative approval report. We had 14 sign applications and 3 temporary use permits last month. And the Downtown Development Authority, the Township DDA, which which deals with the redevelopment of Van Dyke Corridor, is engaging on an update of their Downtown Development Authority plan with an emphasis on the intersection of 24 and Van Dyke. You may remember we did a plan for that area many years ago. Now the DDA is kind of taking that responsibility to take that further. They really want to understand the Planning Commission has a stake in this process and had some involvement in the need for coordination between their body and the Planning Commission. So they wanted me to extend an invitation to you to attend. They're having a public information meeting to start this process, which will be, I think it's August 20th at 4 o'clock in the lower level employee lounge. I'll be attending all the meetings, and as other meetings become available, we'll let you know about them as well.
Great, thank you.
And so if anybody wants to attend, you're welcome to do so. And I encourage if a couple members could participate, it would be very useful. Again, it's one of those coordination things that we need to do more often, and I applaud the DDA for reaching out.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, business from the floor. Is there anyone that wishes to address the body? Okay, come on up, sir. You've got 3 minutes. If we could get your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Jim Verkinderen. I live at 5083 Galaxy in Shelby Township. This is regarding an additional verbiage to an ordinance. I wrote this to Mr. Wynn. I would like the Township Council to add to the ordinance that covers prohibiting motor homes, trailer homes, utility trailers, and campers to add the following. No parking the above items in the street in front of single-family homes in subdivisions, long-term or overnight, motor homes and trailer homes, never. Thank you for your help in this matter. I have the above items in one of my neighbor's homes. I was told by the code enforcement that presently there is no ordinance that covers parking these vehicles in the street as an ordinance violation. Please give me notice as to when this change is going to forward the Township Council. I am more than willing to be present with the Township Council meeting covering this matter. Mr. Wynn said it is not a priority to change the ordinance in front of the council unless the council tells him to get off his duff and make the change request before December or 2015. I almost got hit from someone passing a mobile home and not yielding the right-of-way 3 weeks ago. If I get into an accident because of Mr. Wynn saying it's too much work and not a priority, I will sue the Township of Shelby. Please direct him to make this change, these changes as a priority. He says that the only way he will make it a priority before December or 2015 is if the council tells him to. He has time to waste time like the last meeting over 60-foot lots on 23 Mile Road. What do you say?
All right, sir, your time's just about up, so wrap it up, please.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, and the rest of the council, and especially Mr. Vire, this is Shelby Township, not Detroit or Hamtramck or Hazel Park. This is especially dangerous in wintertime. They can park them in the street long-term, but it's not in their driveways. It is ridiculous that the people have found this loophole in the ordinance. How it is on the public TV, more people will be doing it now that it's on the public TV. He can put this ordinance change along with the no parking farm tractors and farm implements in driveways. Since last meeting, another resident is restoring a tractor in his driveway. I have put 60 code complaints in the last 3 months in my neighborhood. Parking RVs and commercial vehicles have become an epidemic in my neighborhood. What do you say, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Vire? And council, will you please direct Mr. Wynn to make this a priority? Priority number 8 on the wall, fight neighborhood blight 2014 priorities. What do you say, Mr. Chairman?
Your time's expired.
Can you please sign in, sir? Could you sign in? Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.